This is Leader Time by FedNet, a podcast for Senate observers with floor remarks from Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer. April 15th being tax day, Thune remarked on the occasion and last year's tax cuts. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, I don't know a lot of people who look forward to April 15th. No, I suspect tax day doesn't rank high on Americans' favorite days of the year. But I'd wager that a lot more Americans were pleasantly surprised this year when they went to file their taxes. Because thanks to Republicans' Working Families Tax Cuts bill, a lot more Americans kept a lot more of their hard-earned money this year. That's right. Hardworking Americans saw lower tax bills. Tax refunds increased by more than 10% compared to last year. And the average refund is more than $3,400 this year, thanks to Republicans' tax cuts. Mr. President, the American people have now seen firsthand the Working Families Tax Cuts provided significant tax relief. First of all, it locked in the lower rates permanently. In 2017, Republicans lowered tax rates across the board. And as of last year, these new lower rates are now permanent, which means that hardworking Americans won't have to worry about a higher tax bill in the years to come. We also nearly doubled the standard deduction in 2017. The Working Families Tax Cuts raised it even further and made that permanent too. And then there's the child tax credit, which Republicans doubled in 2017. The Working Families Tax Cuts raised it again to $2,200. And Republicans didn't just raise the child tax credit, we linked it to inflation so that it doesn't lose its value over time. And that, too, is a permanent feature of the tax code thanks to Republicans' landmark bill. Mr. President, the Working Families Tax Cuts also introduced a number of new tax relief provisions into the tax code. This tax season, more than 30 million seniors claimed a new $6,000 bonus deduction for older Americans. Over 1 million people bought a new American-made car and were able to deduct an average $1,800 in auto loan interest on that new vehicle. More than 25 million American workers were able to deduct overtime pay from their taxes and realize thousands of dollars in tax savings. And over 6 million workers deducted income from tips this tax year. With all that, Mr. President, a lot more Americans were looking at a bigger refund when they finished their tax returns. And they're thinking about the best use of that additional money in their pocket. Saving for their first home. Investing in their kids' education. Taking a family vacation. Using their money how they see fit rather than sending it to Uncle Sam. Mr. President, as its name implies, the Working Families Tax Cuts focuses on working families. But this bill also did a lot to support America's small businesses as well as family farms and ranches. Thanks to Republicans' landmark bill, 12 million small businesses saw an average tax reduction of $7,000. This bill made the 199A small business deduction permanent, which has been a significant boost for small businesses and for family farms and ranches. One agriculture co-op in my state of South Dakota estimates its impact at over $100 million since it was created by Republicans in 2017. Millions of small businesses, farms and ranches were able to use this provision and reduce their tax bill this year, freeing up money to invest in their operations and employees, create jobs, and increase innovation. And that's not all. The Working Families Tax Cuts made 100% bonus depreciation permanent too, which allows businesses and farmers and ranchers to deduct the full cost of a new piece of equipment the year they start using it. Permanent research and development expensing is already paying dividends for businesses in my state. And a lot of farmers, ranchers, and small business owners breathed a sigh of relief when they heard that this bill raised the death tax threshold and spared them from a potentially devastating tax bill. not to mention from the costly estate planning expenses that come with it. Mr. President, since Republicans passed this landmark bill last summer, we've heard Democrats' typical refrain that this bill was just tax cuts for billionaires. That's laughable. It really is. The largest proportional benefits from this bill went to Americans earning less than $50,000 a year. The increased standard deduction from this bill is something that was claimed by more than 100 million Americans this year to reduce and to simplify their taxes. More than 34 million American families claimed the child tax credit this year, which the working families tax cuts permanently increased and linked to the cost of living. And nearly half of filers, Mr. President, claimed one of the new tax cuts: no tax on tips and overtime, auto loan interest, or the senior deduction. Mr. President, millions of middle-income Americans saw a lower tax bill this year, and that's no fluke. The working families tax cuts puts these hardworking Americans first. It lets them keep more of their hard-earned money to spend, invest, and save how they see fit, and helps hardworking people get one step closer to the American dream.
Schumer discussed the Iran war ahead of another war powers vote, tax day, the Federal Reserve, and more.
So, Mr. President, yesterday, an Ipsos poll found that fewer than 1 in 4 Americans think Trump's war in Iran has been worthwhile. And who can blame them? Every metric indicates that Donald Trump's handling of Operation Epic Fury has been an epic failure. Donald Trump promised this war would be won in a matter of days or weeks. It's now day 47. And let's take stock of the 47 days into this historic blunder. 13 U.S. service members have been killed. Thousands of civilians have been killed and injured across the region. The Strait of Hormuz is not only closed, it's become an Iranian cash cow, and Iran controls the strait is greater today than before when Trump started the war. Iran's nuclear ambitions have only grown, and the Iranian regime is even more radical than before the war. Americans, meanwhile, are shelling out more than $4 for a gallon of gas on average. Now Donald Trump says that gas prices could be the same or a little higher by November. That's his words. Trump says gas prices could be, quote, could be the same or a little higher by November. Unbelievable. Trump's number one promise entering the White House was to bring inflation down, and now he's admitting his own war could drive gas prices up for much the rest of the year. When Donald Trump admits his own war will drive gas prices up through November, you know there's trouble coming down the road for American motorists. Donald Trump is learning the hard way that ending a war is a lot harder than beginning one. He'd rather pick a fight with the Pope online than reckon with what's truly on the line right now: the lives of American service members and the livelihood of American working families. And throughout all this miasma, all this mess, this horrible war, where are the Senate Republicans? Months into this war, still no hearings, no testimony, no clarity on how it will end. Don't the Republicans, when we're in war, don't they know their responsibility? I don't care if they're the same party. Don't they know they have a responsibility to get the facts out and let the American people know what's going on here? Because Trump isn't giving people any idea, but he still keeps changing his mind and his goals in the war, none of which he's achieved. Where are Senate Republicans, the American people have right to ask? Enough is enough. Trump may not understand how damaging his war has been to the American people. Republicans may be hiding from having hearings or asking questions, but Senate Democrats know how damaging the war has been, and we're asking a whole lot of questions. That's why we will force a vote on another war powers resolution. This is the fourth since the war began. I thank Senator Tammy Duckworth for her work on this week's resolution. I thank Senators Kaine and Booker and other members of our caucus for their continuing leadership on this crucial issue. Republicans have voted against this resolution 3 times now, but as the war drags on for 47 days with no end in sight, they should join us on this resolution and end the war once and for all. End all the troubles it's bringing to Americans once and for all. It's 47 days already. Where are you? If the Republicans vote no again, we will continue to force votes on these resolutions every week until either this war ends or the Republicans get the courage to stand up to Donald Trump. On Tax Day, Mr. President, not a single American would say that Tax Day is their favorite date on the calendar. Republicans, however, seem to think that today will mark an inflection point in their political fortunes. Evidently, they haven't been paying much attention. When Republicans passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, they promised Americans that their tax refunds would grow by $1,000 on average. Well, the results are in, and the massive tax relief Republicans promised has turned out to be a dud. Refunds on average have changed only by a third, about $350. And Americans need every penny they can get, but a couple of $100 doesn't go very far on a tax break when the average American family will pay an extra $2,000 on tariff taxes and $740 this year to fill up their tank. That's right. Donald Trump's war in Iran alone has wiped out any tax refund Americans will see this year. Let me say that again. Donald Trump's war in Iran alone has wiped out any extra tax refund Americans will see this year, and that's not including all the increases they're paying because of tariffs and higher electric bills and what they're doing to health care. No wonder only 1 in 4 taxes believe the One Big Beautiful Bill has helped them. Only 1 in 4. That means there are some Republicans who don't like it. 7 in 10 Americans, meanwhile, say they're still paying too much in taxes. 7 in 10 Americans say they're paying too much in taxes, while the ultra-wealthy aren't paying their fair share. And they're right. Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill has been a dud for working families, but millionaires got a $300,000 tax cut. Big corporations got a tax cut of $65 billion. Republicans want to call their bill a working and middle-class tax cut, but truth be told, it should be called a massive giveaway to the ultra-wealthy. The lion's share of the benefits go to those at the very top, while inflation and Trump's war has eviscerated any shred of benefit felt by the rest of America. That's not tax relief. That's not tax relief. That's a brazen betrayal of working Americans. If Republicans think that rebranding their toxic bill will make Americans forget the economic pit that Trump and the Republicans pushed them into, they'll be sorely mistaken. On the Fed, this morning, once again, Donald Trump escalated his attacks on the independence of the Federal Reserve. In an interview on Fox Business, the president renewed his threats against Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, saying that if Powell doesn't leave, he will fire him. There are no legitimate grounds for the president to remove the chair of the Federal Reserve for simply doing his job. Trump's threats against the Fed does nothing but rattle markets, undermine confidence, inject more chaos into the financial system, and then raise rates. Doesn't Trump understand something rudimentary? When there's uncertainty about the Fed's path, rates go up. Trump, you hearing that? The more you screw around with the Fed, the higher rates will be. And you want lower rates. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't understand the economy, the Fed, or interest rates. To every American struggling with high prices, if you want mortgage rates to come down, or if you're worried about the economy getting worse, The president's attacks on the Fed should alarm you. And meddling with the Fed will certainly drive up interest rates because the markets hate uncertainty. We know what's going on. Donald Trump, typical, is angry that his own policies have driven up prices and killed jobs, but instead of owning up to his mistakes, he continues to look for a scapegoat, someone else to blame. That's all he does. He screws things up and then blames somebody else. Doesn't he realize that's not going to solve the problem? That is not going to solve the problem. Blame Donald Trump. That's not going to do it. May make you feel better for a minute or two, but it sure doesn't solve the problem, and it doesn't solve the American people's firm, strong disagreement with what you're doing. Trump wants to fire Powell because he won't lower interest rates, but Trump wants to fire Powell because he won't lower interest rates. But Trump's Treasury Secretary said yesterday that the Fed shouldn't lower interest rates because of the chaos of the Iran war. What is going on in this administration? Trump says one thing, his Treasury Secretary says another. Senate Republicans have an obligation to push back when Donald Trump threatens the independence of the Federal Reserve. And so long as these bogus investigations and intimidation tactics continue, the nomination of Kevin Warsh should not move forward. Mr. President, pursuant to Section 1013 of the Department of State Authorization Act, fiscal years 1984 and 1985, 50 U.S.C. 1546A, and in accordance with Section 601B of the International Security Assistance and Arms Export Control Act, I move to discharge the Committee on Foreign Relations from further consideration of S.J. Res. 123, to direct the removal of the United States Armed Forces from hostilities within or against Iran, unless explicitly authorized by a declaration of war or a specific authorization for the use of military force.
The clerk will report.
Motion to discharge S.J. Res. 123, a joint resolution to direct the removal of United States Armed Forces from hostilities within or against the Islamic Republic of Iran that have not been authorized by Congress.
This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast.